Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully having an amazing day. If you're looking to purchase a GPU for 1440p or a mid-range GPU in general, there's some really good news up ahead because both Nvidia and AMD are waiting in the wings with their RTX 5060 and 5060 Ti, as well as the 9060 XT respectively. And in this video we're going to be covering lots of stuff for those respective GPUs, as well as a big update for DirectX 12's ray tracing. This is going to be bringing a whole host of new cool things to the standard, which is going to improve performance, make visuals look a lot better, and much more besides. So let's start things out with the RTX 5060 Ti, shall we? Because it's going to be, well, a lot of stuff to get through. So the 5060 Ti is going to be releasing on the 16th of April, with both 8 and 16 gigabyte models, and this is courtesy of WXNod on Twitter. So again, they've had a pretty good track record. Now, there were some rumors I saw maybe about half a week ago that Nvidia were postponing the launch of the 5060 Ti to change the memory configurations and basically maybe potentially outfit these with like 3 gigabyte modules or something like that instead. But yeah. And I think that these rumors were kind of spurred on because we allegedly saw a 12 gigabyte 5060 Ti or 5060 that were maybe waiting in the wings, but I don't think that's the case at all. And again, 8 gigabytes now and 16 gigabytes seems all but confirmed. Instead, I think that Nvidia did postpone the launch, and yes, they did, of the 5060 Ti, simply because they wanted to build up a lot more inventory and act as a counter against the RX 9060/XT. Now, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the sales split when there are a lot more GPUs, because let's face it, Nvidia know that GPUs such as the 5060 and 5060 Ti just sell really well. If you guys want a little bit of funsies, you can check out, well, let's say the Steam hardware surveys, or also, I think it's CPU Z now. They've got stats on, I think those are compiled over 3-month periods, and you can see that there is some really interesting data in terms of how the GPUs now are starting to change over the last several months. Basically, there are certain key GPUs which are starting to be sold off, and people are migrating to different cards. So this is a really important metric for AMD and Nvidia, because ultimately, while, let's say, the 9070 and 9070 XT are not competing in the same league as, let's say, the 5090, what they are really wanting to do, that is AMD, is to increase as much market share as possible, because it means that developers will optimize around things, and it just, well, there's just a whole host of cool things that it brings to the table. Now, with that said, I do think that Nvidia will start to push a lot more GB202 chips. I do think that this is true. Mega Size GPU talked about this a while back on Twitter, and some folks are going to say, well, yeah, but we're still not seeing a ton of these cards in inventory, and that is definitely the case. It does take a while for GPUs to be, well, you know, on the shelves. Is a reason, of course, it takes a while because they have to be, well, sent to the AIBs, have to be manufactured, and all of the other crap that goes along with it. And I do think that some of the GPUs, the 202s, that is, the highest end ones, are probably going to be used in the professional lineup, you know, 96 and 48 gigabytes of memory. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I don't think we're going to see the GPU prices of 5090s become like, you know, $2, or should I say MSRP, in anytime soon. But I don't think it's going to take too long before we start to see inventory start to improve. Probably by like mid-April, we might see a slight hint of it, but like May, June, I think things are going to get much more better. Well, they're just going to get better. But let's move on to the specifications now. I'll go over this pretty briefly, but videocard.com have compiled the final specifications, have allegedly confirmed them with multiple sources, of the RTX 5060 Ti. Now, if we compare it against the previous generation, which of course is the 4060 Ti, we can see that there is a small increase in the number of CUDA cores. The clock frequencies have gone up just a smidgen. We're looking at around 40 megahertz, slightly less than that for the boost frequency. The base frequency is almost 100 megahertz higher. Obviously, when it comes to the base and boost frequencies, well, base less so, but the boost frequencies, boosting behavior can differ a lot, especially with different AIB models. It's going to be very interesting to see how performance is going to compare against the previous generation. If I had to guess, and this is not based on leaks, this is purely my guesstimate, it's probably going to be roughly on par with an RTX 4070, maybe a little bit better in like ray tracing. With that said, the configuration now of both 8 and 16 gigabytes seems essentially to be confirmed. We've got WX Nod here. Again, we also, of course, have videocards.com. And furthermore, I think it was like HP also leaked this stuff. So it's like the world's worst kept secret at the moment in tech that there's 2 different configurations. I find it kind of annoying because the 5070 would have been absolutely perfect if it had 16 gigabytes with a wider bus, 256. And the 5060 Ti with like 192 at 12, I think that would have been great. But yeah, it is what it is, unfortunately. I think 8 gigabytes of memory for this amount of compute is not dreadful. 12 gigabytes would have been perfect. It's going to be very interesting though, because the amount of memory bandwidth, we're looking at 448 gigabytes per second, which is a massive improvement over the previous generation part. So maybe actually they will do fairly well. It's going to depend a lot on other things like, I don't think at this point we have the cache configuration that's been confirmed. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes over the 2. But yeah. Of course, as with any of these parts, it's going to be pricing that is perhaps the most intriguing or most important aspect of them. And this actually brings us to the 9060 XT as well. So Harakazi on Twitter has confirmed now that yes, there will also be 2 different memory configurations for the 9060 XT. Again, 16 and 8 gigabytes of memory. So AMD and Nvidia are taking a leaf out of one another's book at this point. Now, Harakazi, I'll also give courtesy credit to WCCF Tech, where they initially spotted this, but not only have ASUS leaked this because these are in the RRA filings, but we've also seen Acer, about to say ASUS again, Acer also have leaked the same thing. So what it seems to be at this point is that yes, there are going to be 2 different configurations. Again, sound like a broken record, it's going to really be the pricing of these cards that is very, very critical. The pricing at this stage for used cards is really weird, and it does seem to depend on different regions as well. A couple of months back, maybe 2-3 months back, a friend of mine, she actually bought, I think it was a 6700 XT? Was it 6700 XT or not 6800? I know they were going between the 2. I think it was the 6700 XT, and they got a really good price for it used. This was prior, of course, to GPUs such as the RDNA 4 lineup being out and so on and so forth. So prices were actually ironically a little bit more stable. Let me know what it's like in your particular region. Again, I think that AMD are doing their best. They've mentioned this a couple of times as well, that they want to get as much inventory into the market as possible. So basically just don't go and pay scalper prices. That's my personal advice to you guys. I know it's quite difficult, especially if you really need the GPU for something like work and you're waiting for your system. Sometimes you don't really have a choice, you just kind of have to bite the bullet. But if possible, please don't pay scalper prices. Just hold off and things will start to get better in the coming weeks. Opacity micromaps and shader execution reordering. Do they sound familiar to you? Well, if you of course followed along with all of the cool new technologies in the RTX 50 lineup of graphics cards, then you probably may well be familiar with at least a couple of those. However, now they are part and parcel of the DirectX 12 standard. I don't think anyone really was surprised about this, but basically DirectX DXR, should I say, 1.2 is now being previewed, and it looks pretty cool. Now, unfortunately, all of the information is not publicly available at this point, and obviously in AMD, Nvidia, Intel, I believe it's Qualcomm, as well as Microsoft, of course, are all working towards this standard, and I'm sure a lot more details will be available over the next couple of weeks, so I will cover this much more extensively. But in a nutshell, we're going to be seeing some really big speed ups in terms of performance, but also it's going to offer a lot of extra cool features in terms of visuals eventually. I think it's very obvious that the whole market, the whole industry is moving towards things like neural rendering, and it will take a while before we really start to see the benefits of this. At the end of the day, ray tracing is still, it's weird to say because, if you look at the release date of Turing, when was it? I think it was like September, was it September 2018? I didn't have that in notes, so I might be a little bit off on the date. So if I am, please correct me in the comments below when you had the, the 2080 Ti's and stuff like that launch. But basically speaking, yes, those cards were available, and you had some games at the time which did have ray tracing, but of course the technology was really in its infancy, and the engines were basically just bolting it on But now game engines are being developed with ray tracing in mind, and it's going to really start to become like just so standard in the industry. I think at this point ray tracing is pretty standard. I'm sure many of you probably disagree. I know that some folks are still avoiding ray tracing when possible, and I can definitely understand that if you're running a more mid-range GPU, but it's going to become, you know, over the next couple of years, I think just absolutely just normal to have ray tracing in games. And again, technologies such as neural rendering and having all of these technologies like upsampling, frame generation, all of this other stuff is just going to be like the standard. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this ties in to the next generation consoles. Obviously, the next generation Xbox, when it launches, there's a rumor that we're going to be seeing the, you know, handheld systems, well, at least not the official Microsoft ones, but kind of like, yeah, it's going to be very interesting because basically it seems that Microsoft could be, you know, scrap that part. It's going to be very interesting when we see the next generation consoles launch, yes, from Microsoft, but we can see Sony probably adopting variants of these standards, albeit with their own twist as well. With that said, guys, take care of yourselves, have an amazing day. Bye for now.